Sometimes you catch yourself wondering, beyond just getting by, what actually makes a life feel deeply fulfilling? Not just like ticking off boxes of success, but that real internal sense of satisfaction. Have you ever been there?
Absolutely. It's a question that, well, it really cuts to the heart of the human experience, doesn't it? And it's precisely what we're exploring in this deep dive today.
Okay.
We're looking at the intricate connection between having a sense of purpose and that sometimes quite elusive feeling of self-fulfillment.
Right. We've really dug into a range of sources for this. I mean, everything from the nitty-gritty of psychological research on motivation to the grand sweep of philosophical ideas about, the good life, and even some really grounded practical advice on how to tap into what gives us that spark and purpose.
Exactly. Our goal here is to really unpack this relationship for you. We want to understand why this link between purpose and self-fulfillment seems to be so powerful. We'll explore the evidence that supports it, and also importantly, consider some of the different angles and the more nuanced aspects of this connection.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then, the foundation. When we talk about purpose in the context of our lives,
Yeah.
what does that really mean? What are we defining it as?
Well, when we talk about purpose here, we're essentially referring to having a central driving aim.
Yeah.
It's a reason behind your actions, something that provides a sense of direction in your life.
Okay.
It's that underlying why that informs what you do, something that feels meaningful to you and gives you that sense of intentionality in your days.
Right, like an internal compass maybe, pointing you in a general direction,
That's a good way to put it.
and then self-fulfillment. That's more about the feeling you get when you're living in line with that compass, isn't it? What does it actually feel like to be truly self-fulfilled?
Exactly. Self-fulfillment is generally understood as the experience of realizing your full potential.
Yeah.
It's a deep sense of satisfaction, a state of overall well-being, and importantly, the feeling that you are living in a way that aligns with who you truly are and what you're capable of.
Okay, so we're looking at this potential strong link between having that why, that purpose, and actually reaching that state of deep satisfaction, that fulfillment. And it sounds like there's some solid research backing this up. Where should we begin with that?
A really insightful place to start is with some of the foundational psychological theories. Think about Viktor Frankl, for instance.
Oh, yes. Man's search for meaning.
Precisely. His experiences in, well, unimaginable hardship led him to a powerful conclusion that finding meaning, having a purpose, was absolutely vital, not just for surviving, but for maintaining resilience and ultimately experiencing fulfillment even in the face of profound adversity.
That's such a powerful idea that even when everything else is stripped away, purpose can be an anchor.
It really can.
And then we have Maslow, right? With his hierarchy of needs. Where do purpose and fulfillment fit into his perspective?
Well, Maslow placed self-actualization, which
Right.
is very closely related to self-fulfillment, realizing your full potential right at the peak of his pyramid.
Right to the top.
Yeah. His observation was that this state often emerges when people are actively engaged in pursuits that really resonate with their unique talents and their deeply held values. And these kinds of activities are very often fueled by a strong sense of purpose.
Uh-huh.
But it's important to recognize, as Maslow himself did, that reaching this state, self-actualization, is actually quite rare. It typically requires a significant degree of personal drive, often sparked by that underlying purpose. So it's not a passive state you just fall into.
Right, right. So it's not just about having your basic needs met. There's that active striving towards something that feels significant. And then we've got more contemporary views, people like Daniel Pink, looking at what motivates us.
Exactly. Daniel Pink's research really highlights purpose as one of the fundamental drivers of what he calls intrinsic motivation, alongside autonomy and mastery.
Intrinsic, yeah. Coming from within.
Precisely. His work underscores that we tend to feel most fulfilled when we believe our efforts are contributing to something larger than just our own immediate concerns. This strongly supports the idea that purpose isn't just a nice to have. It's a core human motivator that's deeply connected to our sense of fulfillment.
Okay, so the theoretical frameworks definitely point towards this connection. But what about actual studies? Is there evidence linking purpose to tangible outcomes like our well-being or even physical health?
Yes, absolutely. There's some really compelling research. For example, a study by Hill and Turiano back in 2014, they found a significant correlation between having a strong sense of purpose in life and, get this, a lower mortality rate across adulthood.
Wow. Lower mortality. That's pretty striking.
It is, isn't it? It suggests a really fundamental link between having a purpose and overall well-being, extending even to longevity.
So having a reason to get out of bed in the morning isn't just a mental boost. It might actually contribute to a longer life. What might be going on there?
Well, that's what the research suggests. It could be several things. Maybe a stronger sense of well-being fueled by purpose leads to healthier habits. Or maybe the psychological resilience that purpose provides acts as a kind of buffer against the negative impacts of stress on the body.
That makes sense.
And there's more. Kang and colleagues in 2019 found that purpose in life is linked to reduced neural conflict during health decision-making.
Neural conflict. What does that mean exactly?
Essentially, having a clear purpose seems to make decision-making easier for your brain. It reduces those internal struggles when you're faced with health choices, which, can lead to healthier behaviors and outcomes.
That's fascinating. So that internal compass we talked about earlier isn't just guiding the big life decisions, but it seems to be streamlining even everyday choices about health.
Exactly. And we can also look internationally, for instance, at the concept of ikigai from Japanese culture.
Ikigai. Yes, I've heard of that.
Right. A study by Sohn and others from 2008, often called the Osaki study, found that individuals who reported having a strong sense of ikigai, that feeling of purpose, a reason for being, also showed lower mortality rates. It really highlights how this connection between purpose, longevity, and, by extension, fulfillment isn't just limited to one cultural context.
Ikigai, that beautiful idea of having a reason for being. It's incredible to see that reflected in research like that. You also mentioned something called life crafting. What exactly is that?
Ah, yes. Life crafting, as explored by Shippers in 2017, is essentially a structured approach. It helps individuals actively reflect on their core values and their important goals, all in order to discover or maybe just define more clearly their sense of purpose.
Okay, so it's an active process.
Very much so. And the research indicates that engaging in this kind of deliberate life crafting can actually lead to a noticeable improvement in overall well-being.
So it's not just about waiting for some grand revelation of purpose to strike. It's something we can proactively cultivate and develop ourselves.
Precisely. And all of this aligns really well with self-determination theory, which emphasizes that our sense of well-being is deeply connected to pursuing goals that we ourselves endorse, that we find inherently meaningful. Again, that element of purpose coming from within.
Okay, so the research paints a pretty compelling picture of this link. Now, let's shift gears a bit. What does this look like in practical terms? What kind of advice do people often give on how to actually find this sense of purpose in their own lives?
Well, when you look at various resources, some really consistent themes pop up. For instance, Fulfillment Hub USA stresses that self-reflection is a crucial first step, really taking the time to understand your passions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's hard to tune into that internal compass if you don't actually pause and listen, right?
Exactly. And then you have sources like In-Said Knowledge, emphasizing the idea that actively contributing to the happiness and well-being of others can be a very powerful form of purpose.
Ah, so looking outward.
Yes, and that this outward focus often leads back to a deep sense of personal fulfillment. It connects you to something bigger.
That ties in nicely with what you mentioned earlier about contributing to something larger than yourself.
Absolutely. And Better Up suggests that identifying your purpose can actually reignite your energy levels. It can also foster deeper connections with other people, both of which are, really vital components of a fulfilling life.
So it seems like this practical advice often boils down to really understanding yourself, connecting with others, and finding meaningful ways to contribute.
That sums it up pretty well.
But are there other ways to look at this? What about, well, philosophy? Are there perhaps more critical perspectives on this whole pursuit of self-fulfillment?
That's a really important point to bring in for balance. If we look back historically, some philosophical viewpoints, like those attributed to Hobbes and Freud in discussions around self-fulfillment, viewed this pursuit with a degree of skepticism.
Skepticism. How so?
Well, perhaps seeing it as potentially driven by ego, or maybe even as an illusion, given the inherent challenges of human nature and, societal structures. This reminds us that the idea of self-fulfillment as a primary goal hasn't always been universally accepted without debate.
So, like Freud's emphasis on the unconscious, the conflicts within us, suggesting maybe complete fulfillment is hard to reach.
Exactly. That framework might suggest that a state of complete and lasting self-fulfillment is perhaps a difficult, maybe even unattainable ideal.
So while contemporary psychology largely leans towards the benefits of purpose and fulfillment, there's this longer philosophical tradition raising questions. Like, should individual fulfillment always be the top priority, or do duties and obligations matter more?
Precisely. Some moral philosophies definitely prioritize ethical duties and our responsibilities within the broader community over the individual pursuit of happiness or fulfillment. It raises that really interesting question about finding the right balance, doesn't it? Between our own personal satisfaction and our role within a larger social context.
That's a really crucial nuance. It's definitely not just about chasing personal happiness in isolation.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that having a purpose alone doesn't necessarily guarantee fulfillment. What other elements are important?
Yes, that's a key point to underscore. While purpose seems to be a very powerful driver, self-fulfillment is, well, it's multifaceted, it's complex. Other crucial components include things like having strong, supportive relationships, maintaining good physical and mental health, a sense of security and stability in your life.
The basics almost.
In a way, yes. And also being engaged in activities you find meaningful, which can certainly link back to purpose and simply regularly experiencing positive emotions. Purpose operates within this broader ecosystem of well-being.
So you could have a very clear sense of purpose but still feel unfulfilled if other fundamental areas of your life are significantly lacking, like if your health is poor or you feel very isolated.
Exactly. And the nature of your purpose also matters quite a bit. Research suggests that a purpose rooted in intrinsic values, those things you genuinely believe in and care about, and a real desire to contribute to others, that tends to lead to more sustainable and deeper fulfillment,
As opposed to,
as opposed to a purpose primarily driven by external validation, like chasing wealth or status just for the sake of it.
that makes intuitive sense. An internal motivation is probably more resilient, more satisfying in the long run than just chasing external rewards that might fade or change.
Exactly.
What about the process of actually finding your purpose? Is that always a straightforward journey? Or can it be difficult?
Oh, definitely not always straightforward. The search for purpose can often be a complex, evolving journey with its own potential challenges. As one article in Psychology Today pointed out, the societal pressure, this feeling that you should have a grand, overarching purpose, can sometimes lead to what they termed purpose anxiety.
Purpose anxiety. Tell me more about that.
It's that feeling of stress, worry, maybe inadequacy about whether you're on the right path, or even if you have a discernible purpose at all. It can be quite paralyzing for some people.
Oh, I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
The very idea that you must have this big, clear purpose could actually become a source of anxiety itself, ironically.
Absolutely. And it's also important to remember that a purpose that's misaligned with your genuine values, or maybe just completely unrealistic in your current circumstances, that can actually lead to increased frustration and a lack of fulfillment, despite your best efforts.
So it's not just about having any purpose. It really needs to be the right kind of purpose for you, maybe right now at this stage of your life.
That's a very good way to frame it.
And I was also thinking about culture, how different cultures might see fulfillment. Is it always centered around individual purpose?
That's a really insightful question. And no, not necessarily. In some cultures, the idea of fulfillment might be much more strongly connected to a sense of collective purpose.
Selective purpose.
Yeah, where contributing to the well-being and the goals of the wider community, the family, the group, that takes precedence over purely individual aspirations.
That makes sense. A strong sense of belonging and contributing to something shared could be a very powerful source of fulfillment in those contexts.
Yeah.
We also mentioned flow states earlier. How do those connect?
Right, flow. Engaging in activities that are deeply aligned with your sense of purpose often leads to these flow states, those moments when you're completely absorbed in what you're doing.
Totally in the zone.
Exactly. Experiencing energized focus, deep involvement, inherent enjoyment. Time just flies. These flow experiences are often profoundly fulfilling in and of themselves, a direct result of purposeful engagement.
Oh, yeah. That feeling is definitely a big part of satisfaction.
Yeah.
And as we go through life, does our purpose have to stay the same? Or can it change?
Oh, it absolutely can, and probably should change. In fact, a key aspect of sustaining fulfillment over the long term seems to be having a purpose that is adaptable, one that can evolve as you grow, learn new things, and as your life circumstances naturally shift.
So being too rigid about it might actually backfire.
It could, yes. A rigid, unchanging purpose might eventually lead to disillusionment if it no longer resonates with who you've become or the life you're living now.
So it's more like a guiding set of principles, maybe,
Yeah.
that can be reinterpreted and applied in different ways as we mature.
That's a great way to think about it, an evolving guide.
And what about those moments when we simply feel content, fulfilled in the present, without necessarily striving towards some big future goal?
Oh.
Does purpose always have to be future-oriented?
That's a wonderful and important question. Fulfillment can certainly arise from just a deep appreciation of the present moment, from practicing mindfulness, finding contentment in what you have right now, without needing to be constantly directed by a long term fixed purpose. Mindfulness practices often specifically cultivate this ability to find joy and satisfaction in the here and now.
Okay, so it's not necessarily an either. You can find fulfillment both in actively pursuing a purpose and in fully appreciating the present moment. They aren't mutually exclusive.
Not at all. They can definitely coexist and complement each other.
And I imagine the specific things that bring us fulfillment might also naturally change as we move through different stages of our lives. What mattered in your 20s might be different later on.
Absolutely. The sources of our fulfillment, including what we perceive as our purpose, can indeed vary quite significantly across the lifespan. What feels deeply meaningful and fulfilling when you're just starting out might be very different from what you prioritize and value in midlife or later years.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The definitions, the research backing it up, practical strategies, philosophical angles, and some of the complexities, the
Yeah.
nuances. How can we really bring this all together? Synthesize this relationship between purpose and self-fulfillment. What's the overarching takeaway?
I think the central takeaway is that while the experience of self fulfillment is definitely complex, influenced by many, many factors, having a strong sense of purpose acts as a really significant catalyst for it. When your purpose is genuinely aligned with your core values, with your authentic self, it becomes much more likely to lead to lasting satisfaction, a sense of meaning, and crucially, continued personal growth.
So purpose isn't like a magic bullet guaranteeing happiness, but it's a powerful and important ingredient in crafting a fulfilling life.
Precisely. A powerful ingredient, yes. But it's also crucial to remember it's not a simple A leads to B. It's much more dynamic. The very process of actively pursuing a purpose that often involves growth, learning to navigate challenges, overcoming obstacles, refining your vision, all of that contributes significantly to the feeling of fulfillment.
Right. The journey itself is part of it.
Exactly.
And it sounds like being intentional about this, maybe taking time for self-reflection, like journaling or mindfulness you mentioned, can be really helpful in aligning our day-to-day actions with that deeper sense of purpose.
Absolutely. That intentionality is key. And to reiterate that earlier point, purpose isn't necessarily some fixed destination you arrive at and then you're done. It's more like an evolving guide, maybe a compass that adapts and recalibrates as you move through life and gather new experiences and insights.
Okay. So to bring our deep dive to a close then, it really sounds like the evidence strongly indicates that having a sense of purpose is a truly powerful, significant contributor to a fulfilling life. It gives us meaning, it fuels motivation, helps build resilience when things get tough.
Hmm.
But it's also a deeply personal journey, right, with its own unique considerations and potential hurdles for each of us.
That's a perfect summary. It captures the essence of it beautifully. And maybe, considering everything we've discussed, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to reflect on. What are your core values, those fundamental principles that truly resonate deep down for you? And how might actively exploring those values help you connect with a deeper sense of purpose in your own life? That exploration itself could be a really valuable starting point, for your own ongoing journey toward greater fulfillment.